Hi, I'm Paul Moyer, and in this video I'm going to show you how we do the new Turbo reports. Okay, so we simply select the client that we want, and then we go to Reports and Printouts. And then over here on the left hand side, that's the usual Turbo quote book if you've got Toolbox, and then you've got the standard one if you haven't, and then of course you've got your variations and other interview forms down there. But what I want to show you today is these new Turbo reports for this side. That's the bills of quantities, etc. Now firstly, if you click on this button here, that will actually print out a step-by-step how to print and read the reports. This one here will be the video that you're listening to now. So we click on the full quote, and then we've got standard or video or turbo, so I'm going to show you the turbo ones now. Now with the new turbo reports, you can display them in color and print them in color, or you can do it in black and white. Now we strongly suggest you do it in color because it's much easier to read when you've got pink for materials and blue for labor, etc. So you've got this series of here of general reports, and then you've got the 3 bills of quantities, and then your accounts, builder's cost sheets, and this is how we change the allocation for subbies and suppliers. So I'll go through some of these here now. Okay, so if I want to scope of works, I simply click on select a scope of works, choose the subbie that we want, so let's say it's an electrician, and then the program will start to produce a scope of works for the electrician. As you can see, the electrician's up the top. And again, being color coded, it's easy to see the pink for the materials and blue for labor and yellow for the totals. So it goes through each item in the job section or the category, and then the component, the quantity of orderable units, or who's whether it's a labor only or not, and then your materials rate or your supplier. As you can see in this particular one, the electrician's not supplying the fan, the electrical PC supplier is, but in all the others he is. Then you've got your material cost, your labour rates, and then you've got your total. And down here, this $8,000, that should pretty much be what your subbie gives you back as a quote, because if he's using the same quantities and you've imported his labour rates, which you can do in the GDX program, then it should be pretty close to the $8,000. If it's not, then you can start asking questions of your subbie, or you may need to go back and change some of your rates. But that's the scope of works for the electrician. The next one I'll do down here is the category totals with margin, so we simply click on that. Now while your mouse is flickering and the report's flickering, that simply means the GDX is filling in the details. If it's a very big job and it's a complicated report, it may take a minute to do. But when it stops, you'll see you've now got the report here. So you've got the different categories, the prelims, rubbish, site prep, concrete floors, etc. You've got the item code, then you've got the component, and then you've got the total for the prelims, total for rubbish removal, total for site prep, total for concrete, and so it goes down the job. Now this is not a bad one if the owner wants to know what details he's getting in without actually giving them the full bits and pieces with all the materials and labour cost. It just tells him, what he's getting in each section and what the total cost is. So that's another report where you've simply got the totals of each individual section. The next two down here are costs, and then the margin and the GST, and the first one is set out by the item, the second one is set out by the subbie. So let's do the subbie one. I'll just click on that, and the program will start to produce that report as well. Okay, so we have the subbie over here, and then we've got the cost x GST, we've got your margin x GST, that's the total then x GST, then it adds the GST, and then that gives us the total for the job. And as you go down, you've got the total costs down here. Okay, so that's a very quick one so that you can quickly see what your margin is with and without the GST. You've also got your list of PCs, just in case the client or the architect wants a list of PCs, and the program will then produce that as well with the category, the item code, who the supplier is. So you can see here in the ensuite, it's the shower screen supplier, the PC supplier, the timber supplier, and then the same with the subbie. So it's very easy to be able to see who's supplying and who's actually doing. Then you've got the item, the quantity, the unit rate, and then you've got your material cost and then your total cost. And where you see wastage in cost, that's usually for tiles, and it just tells you that we've included the wastage in it, and then that's your total for the ensuite on PCs. This one is the kitchen on the ground floor, so that's $11,000. So very quickly and very easily you can read it, particularly knowing the subbie and the supplier and being in color coded. So that's one of the new reports we've got in the Turbo reports as well. Now the main one that most builders tend to use is this one here, the subbies and suppliers. When you go for either or any of these three, you've got some more things that you can do. You can include or exclude GST simply by taking the tick in and out. You can display the report with the QuoteFast short name, so that's the nice neat name that goes into the client's quote book, or you can set it by the subbie's long name, the supplier's long name, and of course that gives you much more details, maybe the sheet size of the gyprock or whatever it might be. Generally speaking though, we've defaulted it to go to the short name, but you can change it. You can also design the report to suit yourself. So these are all the items that are going to be shown at the moment. If for some reason you didn't need to see the material order quantity, just take the tick out of it, and when it prints the reports you won't see that as one of the columns. But we'll select everything. So you see you can change the reports to suit what you need at the time, and then simply click the Create button. Okay, well as you can see it's quite a detailed report. So starting from the left hand side of the screen, and if I say use the concreter as an example, this is the category, in other words that's one of the pictures in the program. Then you've got the description of the item, and that's the short name. Then you've got who the supplier is in the pink, who the subbie is doing the work in the blue. You've got your calculated quantity. Now the calculated quantity is either the area that you traced or the length that you traced, or maybe the quantity that you put in via the keypad. So if we were looking at say the slab here, that would be 40.42 square meters of slab. Okay, because this is the concreter, in other words the labor, there's no material cost shown here. If I went down to concrete supplier, you'd find that you'd have all the material items there and none of the labor items. And here's the labor rate. Here's the labour cost, here's the total, and down here in the black and white, the 4,900, that's the total for the concreter. Up here, the air conditioning, the 4,400, that's the total for the air conditioning, and so it goes down on each particular section. There's your electrician, etc. Okay, and it takes you right down through excavator, fix out, carpenter. But by knowing who the supplier and the subbie is, it makes life a lot easier to be able to say, okay, well I need to know the material cost for the oven, so it's in the electrical PC supplier, and you go down to your electrical PC supplier and you'd be able to find it there. Okay, so that's the report, and that details everything out for you, including the total cost down here. So if there's an item which is not showing here, go and have a look for the material section, in other words the concrete supplier, and you'll find that the material costs are in there and there's no labour, so it's actually broken it up. There is another report where the material and the labour is all on the one line itself. And these two here are very similar, except they're set out by category and by section, plan section, instead of by subbies and suppliers. Up here in the printing, if you've got an A3 printer, which is really advisable because it means you can print out your plans, you set it to landscape and then that'll print the reports for you. If you've got an A4 printer, still set it to landscape and set it to print 2 pages wide so that you can put one page beside the other. And also set the printer to print the page numbers at the bottom of the document, so that it's easy for you just to add the right ones together. Otherwise, you're on a big job, you can end up with dozens of pages and you don't know which one follows which. Okay, so down here, the accounts cost center details, that produces a spreadsheet, and if in the GDX program in the central price list, if you've added in the cost code for your MYOB or QuickBooks or Xero or whatever, then that produces a spreadsheet that you can actually import straight into your accounting software, so you don't have to double entry. Builders cost sheets, that's on an old format, but it's a very good report and a lot of builders still use it, but that one doesn't come up on the screen before it prints. That'll send it straight to the printer. Okay, so just be wary of that. And the last button I want to show you is this one down here, the change subbie or supplier, because you need to know, and the program needs to know, who's the supplier and who the subbie is, and it might be in the wrong area, so you need to change it. So we simply click on that button there. Now as an example, we'll do the framing carpenter. And these are all the items for the framing carpenter, and as you can see here, which are currently the supplier, and here's of course the framing carpenter because they're the subbie. So let's say I want to go to that temporary power pole. Now you can use this search engine down here, so if I just type in say TEMP as in temporary and hit the search button, it'll find exactly what it is for you. So we select an item to change the subby, because remember before I said it's usually not the framing carpenter who puts up the power pole. So if I select that, I can then select the subby that I want to change, and you see that pink and blue note simply changes. So if I click on that, you'll get a darker blue list, and then you can select who you want to put it in. So we're going to say, well, the electrician's going to put it up, and it changes it now to the electrician. So now from all future quotes, the temporary power pole will be allocated to the electrician as the supplier, and the subby as the subby. If you needed to change the pink one, the supplier, just simply click on that and you'll get a darker pink one, and you just choose exactly the same one, okay, or a different one that you need to. So that's how easy it is to change any particular subby or supplier. For example, if you bought your plasterboard from the plasterboard supplier, you can simply click on the plasterer, and then you can go down to plasterboard supplier, and do the same with the other two, of course, and that means that you can buy the board yourself from the supplier, and then you can just get a labour cost for the plasterer to put it up. But I'll put it back to what most people would normally have, and that's the plasterer supplies and fits. So you can see it's very easy. Just select what you want, and that will then change the allocation back in those reports as to who the subby is and who the supplier is. Now, if the person that you want isn't in these lists, then you can add, modify, or delete. You can also change the allocations for this quote only for some reason, just by putting a tick in it. But if I want to add, delete, or modify subbies or suppliers, I simply click on it. And then this is where you can also put your accounting cost center that I was just mentioning before. If you don't want to go back to the central price list, you can actually add it in here. And of course your minimum trade. So you might want to put a minimum of $3,000, say, for the plasterer. And then if the costing comes in less than that, the program will then add the difference on for you back in the central, back in the costed items screen. But if you need to put a new one in, you simply clear, type the name, the accounting cost center, minimum trade, and hit the add button, and then that'll add that to those lists so that you can then select it. So once you've finished reallocating any subbies and suppliers that you might need, now that particularly comes in when you, over in this list here, you might get a not assigned or nil or no particular subby. You can go in and you can change it so that it goes into the various ports correctly. Once you're happy with all your signings, you simply continue, and then you can select the report that you want. So that's the new Print Manager Turbo reports in the toolbox. So you can now do much better reports than you can in the standard, and they're all color coded. They've got more details in them as well. So I hope you've enjoyed this video.